Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. BBT founder Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Namsagaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gauda Bhakti Vrinda ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Govinda. Shama Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhana ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki Jai. Mayapur Navadvip Dham ki Jai. Ganga Mai ki Jai. Jamuna Mai ki Jai. Tulsi Devi ki Jai. Bhakti Devi ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Govinda Madhav ki Jai. Krishna Balarama ki Jai. Shri Shri Gaura Nitai ki Jai. Bhakta Kodi Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Hare Hare. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Krishna Vishnu. Hare Krishna. So it is a great honor, privilege to be here with all of you, and I think I speak on behalf of both of us that we're having an incredibly amazing time in the association of the wonderful devotees here at New Mayapur Dham, and also we both feel not necessarily so qualified to be sitting here before all of you. So therefore, before we begin, we would like to seek your blessings so that we can speak something relevant and bona fide from the most exalted scripture, the Srimad Bhagavatam. Help me by the mercy of Vaishnavas, is anything possible, so therefore we're seeking your blessings. Hare Krishna. So we'll be reading from the third canto. Please forgive. We're deviating. We're deviants. Were we driving the other day and we saw deviation? so we're deviating today from the normal Bhagavatam verse. For the next couple of days we'll read different verses. We were told that's okay, so please forgive if anyone was intent on hearing the pastime of Subari Muni. We've spoken on that a little bit, and I'm sure it will continue. So we're going to read today from the third canto, chapter 16, verse number 12. But before we do, if we can please repeat the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So Canto 3, Chapter 16, verse number 12. Can everyone see that? Okay? Just barely? Okay. Tame swabharto avashaya malakshamano. Tame swabharto avashaya malakshamano. Yushmad yati kramagatim pratipadya sadya. Yushmad yati kramagatim pratipadya sadya. Bhuyo mamanti kamitam tadanugraho me. Bhuyo mamanti kamitam tadanugraho me. Yat kalpatam acharito britayo vivasyaha. Yat kalpatam acharito britayo vivasyaha. Tande swabarto avashaya malakshamano.
Tanme svapartu ravasaya malakshamano.
Yushmad yati kramagatim pratipadya sadyaha.
Yushmad yati kramagatim pratipadya sadyaha.
Bhuyo mamanti kamitam tadanugraho me.
Bhuyo mamanti kamitam tadanugraho me.
Yat kalpatam achirato britayo vivashaha.
Yat kalpatam achirato britayo vivashaha.
Someone else would like to chant.
Tanme svapartu ravasaya malakshamano. Yushmad yati kramagatim pratipadya sadyaha. Bhuyo mamanti kamitam tadanugraho me. Yadkalpatam achirato britayo vivashaha.
Tanme svapartu avasayam arakshamano.
Tanme svapartu ravasaya malakshamano.
Yusmad vyati kramagatim pratipadya sadyaha.
Yushmad yati kramagatim pratipadya sadyaha.
Bhuyo mamanti kamitam tad anugraho me.
Bhuyo mamanti kamitam tadanugraho me.
Yadkalpatam achirato britayo vivashaha.
Yadkalpatam achirato britayo vivashaha.
Ladies, please.
Tanme svapartu avasayam malakshamano.
Tanme svapartu avasaya malakshamano.
Yushmad yati kramagatim pratipadya sadyaha.
Bhuyo mamanti kamitam tadanugraho me. Yadkalpatam achirato britayo vivashaha.
Okay, so word for word. Therefore. Me. My. Swabartuhu. Of their master. Avashayam. The intention. Alakshamano. Not knowing. Yushma. Against you. Vyatikrama. Offense. Gatim. Result. Pratipadya. Reaping. Sadyaha. Immediately. Bhuyaha. Again. Mama antikam. Near me. Itam. Obtain. Tat. That. Anugraha. A favor. Me. To me. Yat. Which. Kalpatam. Let it be arranged. Achirataha. Not long. Britayoho. Of these two servants.
Vivashaha,
exile.
exile.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada.
These servants of mine have transgressed against you, not knowing the mind of their master. I shall therefore deem it a favour done to me if you order that, although reaping the fruit of their transgression, they may return to my presence soon, and the time of their exile from my abode may expire before long. From this statement, we can understand how anxious the Lord is to get his servitor back into Vaikuntha. This incident therefore proves that those who have once entered a Vaikuntha planet can never fall down. The case of Jaya and Vijaya is not a fall down. It is just an accident. The Lord is always anxious to get such devotees back again to the Vaikuntha planets as soon as possible. It is to be assumed that there is no possibility of a misunderstanding between the Lord and the devotees, but when there are discrepancies or disruptions between one devotee and another, one has to suffer the consequences. Although that suffering is temporary, the Lord is so kind to his devotees that he took all the responsibility for the doorman's offence and requested the sages to give them facilities to return to Vaikuntha as soon as possible.
Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manonishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raguna Panditam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Scha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So verse again. Tande Swapatura Vashinam Lakshamanum Yushmal Gatikrama Gatim Pratipadya Sanjaha Uyoma Mantikam Nitam Tara Nugrahome Yakalpatamachirato Vrittayor Vivashaha. These servants of mine have transgressed against you, not knowing the mind of their master. I shall therefore deem it a favor done to me if you order that although reaping the fruit of their transgression, they may return to my presence soon, and the time of their exile from my abode may expire before long. Hare Krishna. So, blessings, Prabhu, Mataji, blessings. So, actually, there are quite a few verses and chapters as we read through the Bhagavatam, which is something we try to do regularly, that we find, of course, every pastime is extremely instructive, but some of them seem so deeply involved and entangled that it's not always so easy to get it, and some of them seem quite controversial. And I kind of like to be a little controversial, I guess, just a little bit, because this pastime I find very controversial. Anyone knows this pastime or what's happening here in this Leela? I'm sure all of you have some idea. Yeah, Prabhuji?
So, the four Kumaras wanted to see Vaikuntha. They went to the door and they were stopped basically by the gatekeepers, Jaya and Vijay, who thought, who are these boys, they should come back later when they're grown up. Now they're just kids, they should go and play and not be here. So the four Kumaras were very upset about this. They said, how is it possible that in Vaikuntha there are atheists? So, anyway, I don't know how much you want to hear.
No, this is good, perfect. Yeah, this is the essence, that the four Kumaras were on their travels to Vaikuntha. Of course, it's also important to remember that the four Kumaras, when embarking upon their travels, were Brahmavadis, which means they were actually impersonalists. And then they reached the gates of Vaikuntha. And of course, there were two gatekeepers, Jaya and Vijay, who were standing there. And they stopped them. And this is kind of a little bit the controversial part for me, because they had a duty which was to, obviously they were protecting the gates of Vaikuntha. Now, if the gates of Vaikuntha didn't need protecting, then why would you have two guards at the doors? So obviously you don't want anyone to come in, just anyone to walk in. And Jaya and Vijay were there kind of doing their service, right? Just guarding the gate, the seventh gate, the last gate to Vaikuntha. And along come four naked little boys. I mean, what would you do? What would you do if you were guarding the gates of Vaikuntha and four naked little boys showed up saying, "Let me in"? I just feel like you'd probably do kind of the same thing, It'd be a little bit like, look guys, it's very admirable that you're here. I mean, you made it all the way to the seventh gate. You must be extremely advanced, but, this is it. You're not going any further. So, just like when Dhruva Maharaj was in the forest and Narada Muni came and said, what did he say to him? Come on, Dhruva, you're just a little boy, Better you go back home. Just give up whatever's going on in your heart and just go back home. But Dhruva Maharaj said, no thank you, sir. Either give me some other instruction or, you can go away. Dhruva Maharaj wasn't really interested in hearing that instruction. And in the same way, here you have the four Kumars. They're not really interested in hearing the instruction for them to go away either. And of course, they're not just your average four little naked boys either. However often you get an average of four naked little boys wandering around. So, in one sense, the setting of this scene is kind of, for me, a little bit controversial because the Jaya and Vijay, you could say, wind up getting punished for just doing their service. You know, they could have easily argued, we were just doing our service. We were just trying to stop persons that we thought who weren't qualified coming in from coming in. But it wasn't exactly seen like that by everyone. And the four Kumars definitely didn't see it like that. And therefore, they decided to curse them. Which for me is another thing. Like, come on! You got four naked little boys. Guys, you know, what are you doing? And you're Brahmins. And then you start cursing people like left, right, and center. I mean, it's one of those moments where, you know, I feel like I'd want to be on the side of Jaya and Vijay, you know. If there was going to be a vote, if it was a democratic situation, you know, if Krishna came and said, okay, everybody, we're going to have a little vote here. Who thinks Jaya and Vijay should not be cursed by these four little naked boys? I'd be like, yeah, of course. I mean, they were just doing their job, Lord Vishnu, right? You know. But this is that's why this pastime is so interesting, because the way that we see the world and the way that God sees the world is often very different. I remember hearing from Dinabandhu Prabhu, of course all of you know Dinabandhu Prabhu, or may know Dinabandhu Prabhu, Vrindavan, takes everyone on amazing parikrams, such an enthusiastic kirtanier. He was telling a story once of the distinction between the way that we see the world and the way that Krishna sees the world. And he was describing a tapestry. Everyone knows what a tapestry is? Well, probably it's similar with the backdrops. Maybe similar. What we see every day, hopefully, it doesn't work out the other way that you put the backdrop on backwards. Because if you see the back of the backdrop, what does it look like usually? It's messy. You see all the knots and the hanging strings and bits and pieces. But the front looks very beautiful. So he was describing how the world is like a tapestry. And Krishna's seeing it from the top. And we're looking up, seeing it from the bottom. And for us, it's like a big mess. Disorganized, disheveled, everything's out of order. There's no organization, it seems. But when Krishna looks down, he just sees everything's working perfectly. Everything is perfectly in order. And it's not always easy for us to get that sublime vision or perspective on situations. So, yeah, there's a lot more to this scene. Also, there's so much backstory, and we'll discuss some of that. But we wanted to use an acronym to describe what we see as the four main points of this pastime. There's actually many more, but just to hone in on four, we've decided to use the acronym of CARE. C-A-R-E.
So C stands for community. So even in, believe it or not, but even in devotee communities, there may be some dispute. I don't know if people experienced it, or some upset, or some, well, just tolerance may be required. So it's fair to say that it's not utopian, if that makes sense, that it's not going to be perfect because it's a material world. But Srila Prabhupada very nicely explains in Atreya Rishi that, actually I don't have that. What's it there?
Yeah, the letter to Atreya Rishi.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says there's no utopia even in the spiritual world. Everyone knows what utopia is? Is that a French word also? Yes, yes. So, he says even in the spiritual world, it's not perfect. And then he gives this wonderful example of the gopis when they try to dress themselves, sometimes their saris are put on incorrectly and they put kumkum on the wrong place. And then he says, even Krishna, sometimes he goes to milk the cow, but because he's thinking so much of Srimati Radharani, he starts to milk the bull. You gotta be careful. Whoever's working in the Goshala, you don't want to go milking the bull too often. So in this way, Srila Prabhupada explains that it may appear from our perspective that even in the spiritual world, it's imperfect. Does that make sense? It's not perfect. So, and this is happening at the gate of Vaikuntha, 6 gates in. So more or less you're in Vaikuntha, and still there's some dispute or difficulty.
So the point is that in community there'll always be some like knocking together. Like when you want to smooth out stones, they put them into a rock tumbler. I don't know if you, and when you put, and then you turn it, they're like this hitting together, and eventually when they come out, they're smooth. So you could use that analogy or the example in a community where it may feel like I'm always going like this, or maybe it's not me, but it's other people towards me, you know, always knocking on me, always doing like this. But the point is that we're in this community, in this environment, that we will come out smooth. We will come out purified, that our knuckles are...
We hope.
Well, yeah.
That is the hope.
Or normally we hope the others will. We don't always see ourselves, but we think, hopefully you come out of this smooth. So it's like to be expected, and we can see even at the gates of Vaikuntha, there is that knocking. There is that. Some disagreements are there. So that's not really the main point, I would say, we felt of this particular pastime situation, but it's more because the disagreements will come. I mean, even maybe we're going to take Prashadam, someone may say, I was standing there and you just came in, or, oh, thanks, you just took the last puri, or you just took this, or, you know, some disagreement. So that's not the issue, but the point is, how do I deal with it? And that makes a lasting impression for me, how my days, determines how my day's going to go, in terms of how I deal with it, but how it leaves a lasting impression on other people as to how you deal with it. If there's some disagreement or misunderstanding, so that's the crux of this point. Do I grow out of my challenges, of my issues, my, you know, maybe I created the situation or I just walked into it, do I grow? Or do I stagnate and just stay there? And then say for the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, with that particular person, my relationship just stops at that point. And it just never goes beyond. And every time I see them, it's like a blueprint. Yeah, you did that. You know, you spoke to me. But it's true. And just before we came, I was cooking, like on Fridays, I cooked the Raj blog at ISKCON London, and there's one particular, very, very, very senior devotee, but for some reason there's some disagreement or issue with a devotee who no longer holds the position that they used to. So it has nothing to do with them, whatever this Mataji was experiencing. It's quite amusing that she was experiencing difficulties. Some may say self-made, but still she was experiencing. And all of a sudden she said, so-and-so Prabhu, he always does this, so, and I wanted to say, he's not the head of this department anymore. He's not even in the country at the moment, just so you know, which you do know. But it was interesting, it's like because she's stuck at that point, and I'm talking 20, 25 years back, that person's name always comes out. And so I was like, they don't understand how hard it is. And I was like, oh my God. So it's just an example that, I mean, I wouldn't say this to them, I wouldn't say it, but maybe you just to let it go, maybe let the stones go, or maybe just move on. It's a stagnation. So communities there, issues or challenges are there, but its point is, how am I dealing with it? How do I perceive them? Am I seeing them as just brick walls, or do I think, well, if that's the wall, I guess I can walk around it, or I guess I can climb over it. I don't have to walk into it. So that was one of the points that we felt with community.
Prabhu also, he gives the analogy that we're all in the hospital. We're all in the hospital. We're all patients in the hospital, trying to come to the perfected platform. We're all in the shower, right? trying to get clean, but sometimes we're like, hey, what are you doing in the shower? Trying to get clean, but you're still dirty. Yeah, but at least I'm in the shower. Okay, trying to be in the shower. So the response from Jaya and Vijay after this situation, of course at first they were a little taken aback by the whole situation, but then they said, after being cursed by the sages, the doorman said, "It is quite apt that you have punished us for neglecting to respect sages like you. But we pray that due to your compassion and our repentance, the illusion of forgetting the Supreme Personality of Godhead will not come upon us as we go progressively downward." Because basically the four Kumars said, you're not worthy, you're not qualified to be here. You don't deserve a place in Vaikuntha, therefore we curse you to fall down to the material world. Now, my nature would have been to start an argument and have a debate to defend the position, right? Wait a minute, fellas, let's sit down and have a conversation. But they just said, actually, you're right. You cursed me. You cursed us. And it's appropriate that we fall down to the material world. So we'll take the punishment. But we have a request because we're sorry. We're sorry we did this. We are repenting. So even though we'll take the punishment, but our request of you is please be a little merciful to us because we are repentant and make it that we don't forget the Lord. And in this, for me, what you see is such sincere servants of the Lord. That they're ready to take the punishment, but they just don't want to forget Krishna. It reminds me, actually, there's one devotee who lived in the ashram. We were brahmacharis together for many years. And then he eventually became temple commander. But he would often remind me, after he became temple commander, you might not get it so much here, maybe, but in London, it's like a revolving door sometimes of madness. Some of the people who come in, it's like, whoa, Krishna's guest. This is Krishna's guest. But sometimes people come in and they're completely out of their mind, like intoxicated or just mentally deranged. So from time to time we have to invoke the right to not allow intrigue to some people. Of course, there's another word that's often used in this kind. We ceased using that word some years ago. Now we just invoke the right to not allow intrigue, because that's the right. But he was one of the people who got that right revoked many years ago. Because he was one of the people who came in and was like, oh, and he used to do all kinds of crazy stuff. And then he said that after his right to attend was revoked, he was sitting at home thinking how much he wanted to be at the temple. And he realized, Krishna's stopped me from coming to the temple because I'm not acting properly. And he would always tell the story that that was the best thing that ever happened to him, that he was revoked. Now, I'm not promoting the revoking people as a mercy, upon them, but sometimes it is the case. And after that, he said he rectified and changed his way so much, and then he wound up becoming a brahmachari. He's still connected with the temple to this day, and at least 30 years, close to 30 years now he's been connected with the temple. So it just means that sometimes there can be a, discrepancy like that. But it's how we deal with it and how we accept it. And he just kind of said, I deserved it. I need to change, stuff like that. Okay, the second letter.
So the second letter in terms of the acronym care is A for the appearance of the Lord. So in this situation, Vishnu appeared. Vishnu came to the gate. And in the same way, we were thinking somehow, to the degree that we are Krishna conscious, he'll also appear for us. You may say, well, he didn't, when I had an argument the other day, he didn't just walk through the door, or he didn't say what's going on. But the point is, in terms of our consciousness, our interaction, the way we deal with someone, it will be based in a very Krishna conscious, gentle way, to the degree that we are Krishna conscious, so Krishna will be evoked in his presence. And generally what happens is when we are challenged or in rock tumbling situation, that's when we see to what degree we are Krishna conscious. Because the response may not always be what we project normally. It may be surprised how we behave. So, Lord Vishnu appears, and he can come in different ways. He can also come, like most times, through the devotees. So someone else may be saying something in the challenging situation or the test, and to the degree that we are Krishna conscious, we'll hear it. Thinking, that's right, I shouldn't have spoke like that. Or, okay, maybe they did something wrong, but maybe I can just let it go. It doesn't have to be a war, it's okay. So we can hear like this. So we also see that Jaya and Vijay, they got chastised, but it seems that due to the sincerity or the humility, the Lord was almost not forced as much, but felt compelled. Let me go there. Let me see what's happening to my servants like this.
Yeah. So it's described how beautiful the Lord was when He appeared, and the Lord accomplishes many things with one action. So by His appearing there in His personal form, one could argue, and the Acharyas also explained, that it was actually for the benefit of the 4 Kumars. Because He manifested in His personal form, and by His manifestation in that form, the 4 Kumars were transformed from impersonalists to personalists simply because of the aroma of the tulsi that had been offered to the Lord's lotus feet. And so the Lord's manifestation served many purposes. Also, the way that the Lord appeared, He came into the scene. Of course, He arrived on Garuda. We'll read a little description, twirling a lotus flower. But as soon as He arrived, He immediately offered respect to the 4 Kumars. He immediately humbled Himself before the Brahmanas, because He considers Himself the servant of the Brahmanas, which is what we'll discuss. So here it's described. The sages headed by Sanaka Rishi saw that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, who was formerly visible only within their hearts in ecstatic trance, had now actually become visible to their eyes. He was adorned with a girdle that shone brightly on the yellow cloth covering His large hips. He wore a garland of fresh flowers, which was distinguished by humming bees. His lovely wrists were graced with bracelets. I think the Lord dressed Himself today just to fit this description. And He rested one of His hands on the shoulder of Garuda, His carrier, and twirled the lotus in the other hand. Such a beautiful, beautiful description of the Lord and His appearance.
So R, in terms of acronym.
So everyone remembers the acronym so far?
Yeah.
Karen, what was C?
Community.
Community. A? Okay.
R is responsibility. So in the sense that in the end everyone has to accept some level of responsibility. Different degrees, and obviously different situations, not black and white, so different degrees, but nonetheless something has occurred or did occur. We have to be, in one sense, 100% responsible for our own part, our own response, but at the same time, obviously there is responsibility on the other side. And so this means there should obviously be some rectification, not just sentiment, because that actually is a form of devotee care. That is not just, okay, Prabhu, Mataji, alright, never mind. In one sense, we want to see something is resolved. We want to see, but you hurt me, or you really did something really bad. So I'm not saying we go around saying you should be punished and this and that, but some form of acknowledgement, which in one sense also rectification, so it feels, the other party feels, okay, so I was seen, I was heard. There was some acknowledgement that something did happen here. So we therefore may acknowledge some things may be wrong, may occur wrong in the community, but, and obviously this is to different degrees, but the point is we don't dwell on it for our own sake mainly, for our own sake, for our own health, our own mental health, and also that we tend, and again for our own sake, mental health's sake, we don't go and labeling, you know, you did that to me, or that one's like that. Because you could walk into a room and it's almost like a cartoon where you have clouds above people's heads, and it's like, yeah, that one's like that, yeah, that one did that, that one goes. Or we could try to strive to just, okay, it happened, it occurred, but try to be Krishna conscious in our dealings and think, okay, here's another opportunity for me to wipe the slate clean and get rid of that cloud that I'm permanently putting over their heads. You know, that's the mean one, that's the critical one, that's the one like that. Basically, in one sense, you could see how when we come before the deities, they don't turn around and say, no, you go away because you were like that. And, I mean, I don't know, they don't seem to stop us every day coming towards them and to take their darshan. So just being more open-minded and forgiving in that sense. And that requires taking responsibility.
Yeah, so this word responsibility, at least in English, I don't know, this must also have a French derivative? Responsibility? Huh? Yeah, so it's actually the same. But if you break the word apart, it's responsibility. It means you have the ability to respond. And it basically means you can choose your response. Now, sometimes we don't get that when it means like, oh, he's a very responsible person. But what does that mean? It means that person is able to make the right decisions about a circumstance or a situation, right? Isn't that how you deem someone as responsible? That they'll make the right decisions about situations? I can trust them, they're responsible. That means they're able to respond to the situation. So, it's a really important point because often we don't choose our response, we react. Anyone here is kind of guilty of reacting to things? Sometimes overreacting? Any overreactors here? Okay, I see a couple of shastras, all the brahmanas are like, shanti, shanti, shanti. Yeah. but yeah, often we can react to something instead of choosing a response. And some of you may know Akrura Prabhu. He does a lot of discussion about leadership. And at one point, he really helped me to see that there is a space. Often we see there's the cause and the effect, or there's the action that causes a reaction. And they're just like instants. Like if the doctor hits you on the knee here, your knee just goes up. There isn't any opportunity for me to decide whether my knee is going to go up or not. It's a knee-jerk reaction. That's what they say, a knee-jerk reaction. But actually, he said, no, there is space between the impetus and the response. We can create space and allow ourselves to make a choice how we respond to the situation. But often we don't do that. But by practice, right? Arjuna says, how am I going to control my mind? It's like the raging wind. And he says, by suitable practice and detachment. So we have to be a little detached from the situation. It's like, oh, I'm in the material world. Things like this happen all the time. It's not necessarily so much all about me and my false ego. It's just about the situation and the circumstance. Let me just be a little detached. Now let me try to practice something different to see if maybe I'll get a different result. Like they say, madness, I think Prabhupada actually used this quote also, madness is doing the same thing again and again and again and thinking you're going to get a different result. That's madness. It's lunacy. So if you want to get a different result, you're probably going to have to try something different. So that's the opportunity to try something different. And whenever there's a dispute, I often use this example that you have two persons, they come against each other with opposing views. And then there's tussle back and forth like this. The only way that ever gets broken is when someone goes like this. and gets on the floor and says, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I made a huge mistake. It's my fault. And I have a story that I often tell around this, but we don't have so much time. But as soon as you do that, it's amazing that everybody just falls to the floor and says, okay, let's just let this thing go. Now, if you fall on the floor and the person standing up starts kicking you in the head, then it's going to be apparent to everyone who's got the problem, So, anyway, what can you do? But somebody has to take the humble position. But it's really difficult. It's really, really not so easy to take the humble position, especially when you think that you are right. It's the most intoxicating drug on the planet. It's not heroin. It's not whatever other drugs may be out there. It's not crack cocaine, whatever it is. It's being right. It's so intoxicating. And we live off of it day to day. The false ego lives off of this being right about things. Nobody wants to be wrong. So in these situations, it's very difficult. But we have to be able to respond in order to get the desired result. So the 4 Kumaras, after this situation, they say, "Oh Lord, we pray that you let us be born in any hellish condition of life, just as long as our hearts and minds are always engaged in the service of your lotus feet. Our words are made beautiful by speaking of your activities, just as tulasi leaves are beautified when offered unto your lotus feet, and as long as our ears are always filled with the chanting of your transcendental qualities." So we see that Jaya and Vijaya were humbled. The Lord comes, and actually when the Lord comes, we'll hear this in a moment, he takes such a humble position that the 4 Kumars are thinking, oh no, what have we done? What have we done? And actually the Lord never chastised them. He chastised Jaya and Vijay in front of them, and they felt humbled. And Prabhupada tells this story that in Bengali culture, the mother will never chastise the daughter-in-law. She will only chastise the daughter in front of the daughter-in-law. And the daughter's like, Mom, what's up with that? It's like, what did I do? I didn't do that. She did it. But the daughter won't do that either. The daughter understands. It's culture. She won't chastise the daughter-in-law directly, but actually she'll chastise the daughter in front of the daughter-in-law, and then the daughter-in-law feels it in her heart. Oh no, what I did wasn't right. And she got in trouble for it. And then she begins to rectify herself. And she never got chastised. Now the daughter might become a little resentful, but the daughter understands Mom's only doing this because she wants to correct her. So she's also not going to leave the room and give her a black eye or anything like that. Everyone's going to act according to the culture, so like that. And then the last one.
The last one is E, which is expert leadership. So Lord Vishnu comes and he sets such an amazing example, as was said, where he chastises, as you were saying, the 4 Kumaras, Jaya and Vijaya, but indirectly it's being felt by the other party. It's being felt, okay, oh dear, maybe we were a little bit hasty, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Oh dear. So also, Lord Vishnu, which is also a really important point to note, is he creates an environment with his servants that you will come back. It's really important at this point that they're not eternally condemned. Sometimes we can do that where maybe when you have to, in terms of responsibility, go away, you can't come here, or either because we have to tell them to go away, or because of the situation that's occurred, they may be dealt with in a way that someone feels, I can't go back, I feel embarrassed, or I know when I go back I'm not going to be, like everyone around me still going to look at me in a certain way. So the responsibility is on us, that if someone does, something occurs, I hesitate to say this word, like fall down situation where they have to leave or end up leaving, we should create such a loving community environment that there's no hesitation when the time is right to come back. As in a genuine loving family, you feel, of course the door's always open, of course I can go back to my parents or do this. So Lord, we should create this environment where it's understood, you do what you need to do, you do that rectification, but then I want you back. Then I want you back here. That's very powerful, very, very powerful. So it's very important how we treat others when they make a mistake. You know, when there's an accident, when something occurs, how do we behave? Sometimes in England there's this saying, ambulance chasers, or I don't know if you have it here, where there's a need, when something occurs, everyone wants to see, like, what happened, what's the gory details, did the car turned over, or this one fell over. We're so intent on seeing the lowest, you know, the negativity, as it were, that we're not thinking, how can I help you though? You know, okay, that occurred, how can I just be there for you? And if you think about it, even if you commit some crime in society, you're going to get out. You know, you're going to do your time, and it's going to be like, yeah, you have to stay in the jail for 2 years or 5 years or 10, but they still come out and they still get rehabilitated into society. And you may not even know the person next to you may have committed some crime. Sadly, it can be sometimes sadly in our society that we're even less forgiving than that, in the sense that we always say, oh, you know, that one did that. You know, that one 10 years ago, when they were Bhakti or Bhakti, be careful. I know it's 20 years now, but just be careful. You know, they never get off parole. They're always going to have that, always have that sort of criminal image, as it were. So,
there are past times with Srila Prabhupada where, like once one senior devotee, he left and went away, and the devotees, they all wanted to write some letters and send them to all of the temples worldwide to say, whatever you do, don't let this person in. And Prabhupada stopped them. And he said, no, you can't do this. He said, if you do this, you'll spoil it for him forever. He'll never be able to come back. So even at the point at which what he had done was not such a nice thing, but Prabhupada was already thinking how he'll be able to come back. And then another situation, not the same person, but another one. Because sometimes people say, oh, on Prabhupada's day everything was perfect. Prabhupada dealt with so many crazy things, you know. So many things were going on in his time. And this one devotee had also gone away. And then he showed up, I think it was in New York, some years later. And Prabhupada immediately called him over and embraced him. And he said, oh, you can cook for me today. And the devotees went to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, he's not even following the principles, he's not doing anything. How can you just let him in and come in and cook for you? And Prabhupada said, what can I do? What can I do? He is like my son. I have to accept him. So this is the deep compassion. Now, of course, also there are times when, you know, there's one story that kind of juxtaposes this situation where Prabhupada, when he would travel, he used to tell everyone, yes, yes, I will come to your house tomorrow. Yes, yes, everyone will come, especially he was once in Mauritius, and Shruti Kirtipu tells a story. And he was telling everyone at this event, yes, yes, I'll come to your house tomorrow. And he said, just speak to my man Shruti Kirti, he'll make all arrangements. All these people started going to Shruti Kirtipu, and he's like, we're not going to come to your house tomorrow. And they're like, but Prabhupada said he was going to come to my house. And he said, we leave on a plane at 9 a.m. There's no way. Oh, but why did Prabhupada say it? Now you're... And so Shruti Kirtipu went to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, why are you telling all these people that you're going to go to their house? You know we're leaving at 9 in the morning. And Prabhupada said, it is my service to say yes, and it is your service to say no. And so, that's the situation. And that's how you get, you know, the adage, good cop, bad cop. Because someone has to uphold things in a certain way, and then someone has to be merciful. So sometimes we see, and I know from my experience as a manager or leader, that I'm like laying down the law. Here's the rules. Don't cross the line. This is how we roll. And then like the guru comes in and loves everybody. and they're like, but Gurudev loves me. And I'm like, I'm glad Gurudev loves you, but you're still not coming in the building. Okay? It's difficult sometimes, and I've had conversations even with my spiritual master who's like, yes, sometimes you have to do that, but at the same time, our hearts should be filled with a compassion to want to allow them back in, not that we just wish they disappear into the crevices forever or something. So we'll finish with these verses. The Lord says, to me, the Brahmana is the highest and most beloved personality, and the disrespect shown by my attendants has actually been displayed by me, because the doormen are my servitors, and I take this to be an offense by myself. This is what this is what the Lord is saying. Therefore, I seek your forgiveness for the incident that has arisen. This is perfect leadership. The leader comes and takes responsibility for the servant's mistake. He says, okay, you're going to have to curse them. Then he says, anyone in the entire world, even down to the Chandala, who lives by cooking and eating the flesh of the dog, is immediately purified if he takes bath and hearing through the ear the glorification of my name and fame. Now you have realized me without doubt. So he's saying this to the four Kumars. Now you have realized me without doubt. He's letting us know this is why I came here really. Because now you've had my personal darshan. Therefore I will not hesitate to lop off my own arm if its conduct is found hostile to you. So the Lord is willing to dismember his own body if somehow it offends or upsets his devotee. The Lord is saying he'll cut off his own arm. And then he concludes, he says, because I am the servitor of my devotees. So this is the mood of the Lord. So we've gone well over time. My apologies for that. We'll stop here. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Hare Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay. Well, you're a leader, so you ask the question. Everywhere I go, I have to say, is it okay?
It's just for me, it's a little bit still controversial at the end, because for Kumaras they came as a personalist, and then the Jaya and Vijay, they was the servants of the Krishna.
So you're, yeah, I get that. So you still see an unresolved controversy. So everyone knows the backstory also? And this is another lesson, we didn't put it in here. But Vishnu also says, basically Jaya and Vijay did the same thing to Lakshmi Devi. So when Lakshmi Devi was trying to come in, they also stopped her. And now, I mean, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, right? So she went back to Vishnu and said, yeah, those two guys. But Vishnu didn't do anything himself personally, but he assured her, don't worry, rectification will come. But that was the backstory. They had actually also stopped Lakshmi Devi from coming into through those gates.
But order of Vishnu, because he wanted to take Christ.
Yes. So the controversy continues. Krishna. I hadn't heard that part, but yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm not sure if we're okay. Yeah?
Sorry.
Make it quick.
No, quick, later.
Yeah, that's
Yeah? Go ahead, quick.
No, later. That's
Okay, here we go. Yes, sir.
I also offended devotees and then they left and didn't come back to the temple, and I tried to apologize. I wrote them, but I didn't get answer what to do, to just keep writing more.
Well, I don't know if you've ever attended Mahatma Prabhu's forgiveness seminar. Has he ever been here and run that seminar? No? Not yet. So not yet. Anyway, it's a very powerful seminar. But inside of that, forgiveness is, we also sometimes have to forgive ourselves. And within our heart we burn with repentance or anxiety for what we did. And we may try to make amends, but if after many attempts it doesn't seem to be happening, then we also have to forgive ourselves. Pray to Krishna and beg him to please forgive us, and we also have to kind of learn the lesson and also move on. Otherwise that incident can then destroy our spiritual life. Does that make sense? Now, it might not be correct, whatever you did, whatever the million things that I've done, but at the same time, somehow we also have to be able to forgive ourselves and try to move on. Because we don't know the plan of the Lord always. We just don't know the plan of the Lord. So, but we have to try to do our best to stay fixed in our devotional service. And we're going to make mistakes. I mean, the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, every endeavor is covered by some fault. Somehow we think we're right, but we're always wrong in some way. You can always find imperfection in anything and everything. Prabhupada said, even you can find fault in me if you want. So every endeavor is covered by some fault, so we make mistakes. But the bigger mistake is if we don't learn from the mistake. If we learn from it, and if these persons won't allow us to rectify it with them directly, then we say to Krishna, I made such a huge mistake. Please help me to not make that mistake again. Please help me to learn that lesson so that I don't offend your devotees anymore, Krishna. And then we can move on. Not that it will ever really leave our heart, but at least we can try to move on. I don't know if that answers the question, or Swami Prabhu, have any suggestion?
We have to forgive ourselves, because obviously if we were all such offenders, we are, nobody would be here, we're all killed, and so the Lord is kind look on us if we are the right.
Very nice. Thank you. We'll finish here because we're offenders now. We're so late, making everyone late for prasadam. Just continuing to delay everyone's service. We're probably going to get cursed later. Prabhupada Bhagavatam ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai, Nantakoti Vaishnava ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi.